Hello, and welcome to the Story First podcast, a weekly show where we talk about Web3 NFT projects focused on storytelling. We believe story-focused NFT projects are built to last and will form the foundation of a new breed of hugely influential properties in gaming, entertainment, art, and beyond. The hashtag Story First podcast highlights the mavericks and leaders who are leveraging the power of NFTs to tell the blockbuster stories of tomorrow. My name is Devin Sawyer, and I am joined by my esteemed co-host, co-founder, and colleague, Barry, aka Crayons. Barry, say a quick hello.
Hello. Good morning or good evening, wherever you may be.
Together, we represent Story Prima, which is a decentralized autonomous organization with a mission to accelerate the growth and success of story-focused NFT projects through media, research, education, and project incubation. But we're not here to talk about Story Prima today. Today on Story First, we are most honored to welcome Elf from the Forgotten Runes Wizard community, a very popular and burgeoning NFT project. And we're very honored to host this podcast because the Forgotten Rune Wizards is a very deep lore heavy, big universe built with community at the center. So Elf, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your time. I'd love to start. Yeah, I'd appreciate it. So Elf is an anon, pseudo-anonymous in the crypto Web3 space. And we'd love to start with you and, introduce yourself. Tell us your origin story. How did you get into Web3 and NFTs?
Sure, yeah. So I've been an artist all my life. I mostly started out with traditional materials like oil paint. And yeah, when I graduated college from fine art school, I had the sudden realization that making a living as an artist was extremely difficult. And so, especially because I was living in the Midwest, where there's almost no art scene. So I had a choice. I could either go to the East Coast and continue pursuing fine art, or I could go to the West Coast and study animation. And so I went to the West Coast. I went to Cal Arts. And, I always tried to bring a sort of fine art ambition into the animation that I worked on. But what I really loved about animation was that, unlike painting, which has got like a nearly 1,000-year history, animation was a relatively new medium. I think it's only like 100 years old. And so there's still a lot of new territory to explore in animation. Especially in like CG animation and, any kind of computer animation. And then, so while I was at Cal Arts, I studied 2D animation and CG animation. And then the deeper I got into CG and all the different software, I started getting interested in video games, which is an even newer medium with newer frontiers. And so that's sort of where I sort of blossomed, studying CG, video games, interaction. Yeah, and I could continue on that, but I don't know. Did you want to?
Yeah. I mean, that's great. Yeah. So no, I mean, that's sort of getting to where you are today. So, obviously in video gaming, it's a different type of storytelling, kind of lends itself to the NFT landscape, and certainly PFP projects. But you've got a bit of a very unique spin. So tell us a bit about the Forgotten Rune Wizards and the origin story around how you got, implemented into the Web3 and as NFTs for the community.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, I suppose I had been interested in crypto and Bitcoin since, I don't know, I guess it would it come out in like 2009, and I heard about it then and it sounded interesting. I wasn't like super
Nice.
into it, but it's always been just sort of in the background as a curiosity for me. Um, but I dove in heavy when COVID happened. COVID changed everything for me, as it did for everyone. Because basically, I was working at, I guess you could call it a video game studio. And then COVID happened, and then we all got sent home and we all worked from home. And suddenly I had a little more free time to just pursue other things. And, amazingly at that time, you had a few things going on. You had COVID happen, and then you had the whole market crashed, which for me was like, oh, here's an entry point. And then the third thing that was like starting to rumble was all the talk about the Bitcoin halving. And so I started like learning about what the Bitcoin halving is and the effect that it typically had on the market. You couple that with like the crash, which was a good entry point, and it was suddenly just, it was a rabbit hole that was just irresistible to me. So I started like really just studying crypto hardcore. And then a few months after that, NFTs started just becoming a really big thing. Like I had heard about the crypto kitties. I think that was in 2017. But that was like basically the only NFT project at the time. But then things like Rarible came along, where it was suddenly accessible to everybody. And being a digital artist and having this new found interest in crypto, for me, it was perfect. It combines the two things that I love. And so I started making my own just one-of-one NFTs, putting them on Rarible, got really into the community, started meeting a lot of new people on Twitter. And it was sort of, it felt like a renaissance. It felt like sort of a new movement in art. And yeah, it was great. I did that for a few months. And then my partner, Dota, who is the programmer who I've known for about a decade, I'd be talking with him about crypto and NFTs for a while. And then suddenly one day he texted me and he was like, have you heard of these like 10K character collections, these generative collections? He's like, we should do one of these. And I was like, yes, let's do it. It looks like fun. And so we batted around a few ideas on what the theme would be. And we landed on the wizards because, for a few reasons. Number one, I'm a huge fantasy nerd. I love Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones. Number two, I knew that if we used this genre, it would just, it's so rich in content and storytelling and characters and world building. It would just be like it would be endless if we dove into this genre, which is what I wanted. And number three, even with my own one-of-one NFTs, I wanted to world build. I wanted like a whole like cast of characters that would just you could tell endless stories with them. But I was running into a wall doing it myself because I was making them all as like full CG rigs, and it takes like 2 weeks just to make a single character. But then suddenly Dota comes along and he's got a generator, and we could like spit out 10,000 characters pretty quickly. That was a major development for this idea of decentralized world building. Like immediately being able to spit out 10,000 characters, it was the world building hack that I'd been looking for. So yeah, I mean, I could really elaborate on that, but that's how Forgotten Runes got started.
And we often at Story Prima have the discussion about, these PFP projects that, have some interesting lore, but it's relatively superficial. And then you've got, but great art and even great community, and they're wildly successful on those facets. But the Forgotten Rune Wizards has very deep story, quite intricate universe building, and the community is heavily involved in it. Can you talk a little bit about some of the what are the key components of the universe that keep the community engaged and your story knit together, because you've got a decentralized nature to it as well.
Yeah.
And the book of lore that you guys have also, I've forgotten what it's called, but I've been through a bunch of the entries. So that's also pretty fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So there's a lot of features in the Forgotten Runes Wizards cult that really put lore first and sort of incentivize it. So, there's a couple things. Like, I would say when we first started building the collection, I very early realized that a 10K generative collection is a very powerful storytelling vehicle unto itself. And so, at the base level, there's a few things that we did differently. Number one, we showed a full body character. Most NFT projects at that time were focused on just like the PFP, like portrait, which is just like a head and shoulders portrait image of a character. We did the full body because I wanted them to feel like full characters that could go on an adventure. Number two, again, most other PFP projects were like doing like a single character, like name an animal, and then that's the project, an ape, a cat, a zombie, a penguin, or whatever. And you could argue that those characters, it's all literally the same character that's just wearing different costumes. Ours is different. We have I think 120 different heads, tons of different bodies, tons of different spells. So it's like, we definitely don't have the same character repeated over and over. So that's number one. Number two is our generator is very sophisticated. So a standard generator just takes all the art components and randomly slaps them together and done. That's your collection. That did not work for us. Simple randomization is just chaos, and we didn't want that. We wanted to give our generator direction, art direction, story direction. And so we've got this feature in our generator called, we call it affinity. It's essentially just a way of giving the generator direction. And so we spend, after we get the art done, that's just half the battle. Then we spend the next few weeks refining the hell out of our generator and giving it direction. And so ultimately what ends up happening is our characters are they have harmony. They're put together either by color, so all the colors look unified, or they're put together by a theme, or they're put together by just any kind of feeling. Every single character has a cohesive unity to it.
It's structured.
Yeah, every character is very structured. And when you do that, now every character doesn't just look like chaos. It looks like it's got a story. It looks like it's got a personality. And so that right there was a way to infuse more lore and story into the base NFT. So we had that. Then we gave every character a name. The naming system was even very directed. Most PFPs only give their NFTs a serial number, but our characters have names. And the names are tied to the heads. They're not just randomly assigned. They have meaning. They have purpose. So yeah, the art, the names, the full body, all of this stuff suggested character backstories and lore underneath. Then we released a map, and the locations on the map were tied to the names. They were tied to the art. The theme through all of this is connecting all the pieces in sort of a rhizomatic way rather than just like pure chaos. These are the different ways you can infuse story into a 10K collection. So yeah, and then after that, as you mentioned, we started releasing other things. The biggest thing being the Forgotten Runes Book of Lore. So this was an online digital tome where if you own a wizard, you could go to that wizard's page and you could create a lore entry. And so this can come in the form of a story, a poem, art, animation, music, whatever you want. You attach that to the character that you own. I think we currently have about 2,000 lore entries, which is amazing. You know, and so like the whole idea behind this is one of decentralized world building. You know, so in the past, you look at worlds like Middle Earth or the Star Wars galaxy or Westeros or Hogwarts. These are gigantic worlds that were all created by a lone genius at the top. But the Runiverse is created by a community. All of the characters in the Runiverse are owned by individual holders who own that character in every way. They own it legally, they own it financially, they own it emotionally, they own it aesthetically. And so they are allowed to create that character's lore and backstory. We at Magic Machine, we create the world. Everybody else creates the characters. And so this combination, this sort of hybrid approach to world building is what is allowing the Runiverse to be built at just a breakneck speed. It's just growing so fast, and it's so complex, and it's so beautiful. You know, just look at our Twitter timeline and you'll see just tons of amazing cult content. We don't call it derivative art, we call it cult content. And it's just, you know, every day people are adding to the Runiverse and just making it more and more complex. So
amazing.
Anyway,
No, that's what in your mind kind of keeps the story tied together, or does it fracture? Can you talk a little bit about, you know, with possibly as many as thousands of people, or you mentioned 1,000 people writing lore into
2,000.
your, how does that work? Do you feel the story knits together? Does it fit to your universe? Is it possible to break? Can you talk a little bit about the community impact on the overall universe you built?
yeah. It's a good question. It's something we think about a lot. You know, there's a few different ways to approach it. You know, I would say at the base level, the whole project is built on these like timeless archetypes that have worked their way all throughout human history, all throughout culture, across the globe. There's a lot of archetypes that just, they're everywhere. No matter where in time you go, these archetypes are there. And a lot of our project is built on those. And so when you start with that as your foundation, it's pretty amazing how the hive mind all just sort of subconsciously understands and agrees without even cooperating, without even necessarily knowing what everyone else is writing. When you start to look at the Book of Lore and the things that people write, it syncs pretty damn well, surprisingly. But perhaps not surprisingly, because these are these timeless archetypes that humanity has always dealt with. And so that's the base level that sort of keeps a cohesion across the whole thing. On top of that, you know, we at Magic Machine, we try to sort of communicate like a baseline meta narrative. That, you know, we always tell people, like, you know, when you're creating your lore, create for your character only. Don't try to say too much about the world at large. Like, we'll handle that. You just write for your own character. And, you know, when you sort of have that as a structure, again, there's not a lot of disharmony. It all sort of works. And then, finally, I would say this is a world built on magic. It's a world that readily acknowledges like parallel dimensions. It has time travel. And when you have a world where, things are sort of flexible and in flux and magical, then there's not like a hard, rigid rule set that will break the continuity. And so if people do somehow write totally contradictory lore, it works because we have magic and we have time travel and we have parallel dimensions. And, you can always kind of magic your way out of that stuff.
Nice.
You talk about the archetypes. You're also, not you, like fantasy projects have been roughly following similar not guidelines, but similar stories or tropes since Tolkien. And
yeah,
like I'm also a huge fantasy dork. I've been reading those books since I could read. And it makes it, if you just picked fiction, write a fiction story, it would go bonkers. But within fantasy or sci-fi or some other niche, it makes it a bit easier to get people on the same boat.
Yep. Yeah, no, I mean, you go back to like Gilgamesh or Beowulf or, Greek tragedies, it's all very similar. I mean, Joseph Campbell in The Hero with 1,000 Faces, that's, a huge influence on me. And, it's that sort of thing is amazing. And it's still true today. I mean, even like Marvel movies now, you can see the archetypes in those that Joseph Campbell sort of outlined and showed us that, they're working their way all throughout human history.
You talked a lot about it, but the idea of structure in your project, do you guys at Magic Machine talk about that very often, or does the structure you put in place, did it just kind of come about organically?
Yeah, we talk about it a lot. I mean, again, I've told the cult that, if you use these archetypes as sort of your scaffolding when you're building a story, then you've got your whole legendarium just laid out before you. You don't even have to like create it from scratch. Just use the archetypes and build on top of that. And, I would say that's maybe like hack number 2 that I suddenly realized one day is, you don't have to just like start with a blank page and just work from scratch. Just use human history, use the archetypes, and you've got so much of the work done for you. I study a lot, like how the hell did J.R.R. Tolkien create such a huge world, or George R.R. Martin? And like George R.R. Martin, for example, he used so many influences just from human history, like the parallel between the Seven Kingdoms in Westeros and like the War of Roses in ancient England, I think it is. There's a lot of parallels there. And it's partly that's what makes it feel so real, is just because it's inspired by actual history.
Yeah, I just think that's an interesting topic in the world of DAOs and decentralization. There's projects that they're striving to be completely bottom up driven, right? The community decides everything, and I tend to think that. So I'm a writer, and I tend to look at everything through that lens. And I don't say I'd be surprised if the completely decentralized NFT like world building story projects, if they were as successful as those that provided some top down structure, like just a few constraints, right? Like a giant sandbox in which to play. And like you guys have a few constraints, and they're not hard rules, like you can play around in them. But I think that structure is important for creativity because it avoids the blank page.
No, I totally agree. And I think that goes for just about any art practice. It's, people like maybe naively think that like making art is about freedom, which it is, but some of the best art comes with some creative constraints, because that's when you have to that's when you have to innovate.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good way to put it.
What I like about what you're sharing today is that you create an element of bottoms up, and as much as the universe is established for your characters to play it, it's very clear that the community owns their wizard. And so how does that community fit in the world? It becomes a natural extension. I think you described it as cult content and a bit of hive mind, but that's clearly enabled by the community's passion for the universe and the characters in which they've minted and or purchased on the secondary market. If does that sound right for you? Do you think that it is the universe in which you create as the playing field that enables the community to get excited?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. We do a weekly spaces on Twitter called Wizard Wednesday. And, that's a place where we divulge a lot of the meta narrative. I'll also say there's other things we did that sort of, I think, sort of inspired creativity. I mean, just the fact that we used very simple pixel art as the base NFT, what we've discovered is that it created like a really low barrier to entry. As opposed to if we had done really high polished CG models or very well illustrated characters, using pixel art as your base NFT, anybody can buy a sprite for $20 and start making pixel art. It's hard to do pixel art great, but just about anybody can do basic pixel art. And so that has allowed a bunch of quote non-artists to actually start making art. And it's shocking how well people are executing on this. People who constantly tell me I haven't made art since I was an 8-year-old. And now every day I'm thinking about stories and animation and art that I can make for my wizard. It's kind of like Lego blocks or Minecraft. Anybody can build something with those. That's the beauty of the pixel art.
Do you mean your community is creating art around their characters, so writing a lore and then also creating pixel art?
Yes. Yep.
Oh, that's awesome. That's super cool.
Yeah. Because it's the pixel art is it's a relatively easy medium to use. And then even from a philosophical standpoint, just the word, the title Forgotten Runes, it means so much. I could talk about this for an hour, but basically put a rune is just a simplified pictogram that represents a larger concept. And so, that applies to the actual runes that are in the collection. But, I often say that the wizards themselves are runes. They're these very simple, minimal, pixelized characters. They're like a creative primitive. They're sort of a seed of creation. And from that very simple pictogram, you can extrapolate, stories and very complex art and illustrations, and you can just go in any direction with it. But the fact that we started with such a minimal, simplified, creative primitive, I think that really it stimulates the imagination in a way that I think a very detailed, high polished piece of art would not.
In writing, I think about a longer piece, right? Like novel length or something like that. I think the best stories leave a lot up to the imagination, but the best authors use what I just call them breadcrumbs, right? From Hansel and Gretel, to lead the reader in a particular direction without explicitly pointing out everything. Like Tolkien, right? The scene in the beginning of the first book where they cross in the river and one of the elf lords stands there in all his elfin glory. That's all he says. But so many fantasy writers would use 2,000 words to describe every single thing about that. Yep. But the idea of the simplified, the pictograms or the pixel art characters, they're kind of like breadcrumbs in a way. It's they just give people a direction in which to go. So
absolutely.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yep. And it sounds like it makes it, you talk a lot about your project and the story and the way you went about it as being what I guess you could call accessible for the community. So it sounds like it's easy for them to participate and bring their wizard to life. I love the The way you described it as a ruin being a pictogram that represents a larger concept. And if your community gets the idea that, the IP you own in that wizard is for you to expand upon and create. But that's amazing. But what is it? What do you guys do as leaders in the project to encourage that participation? How do you get the community to care enough? You're a successful project, you've got a floor. So there's a speculative nature that gets people to care, but it sounds like you actually have people caring about the story and building it. What can you talk about how you were successful in getting people to care about the story in light of a profitable endeavor?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We have a saying in our community. It's lore, not floor.
Yeah, perfect.
And beautifully, that coin, or that term was coined by a prominent wizard in our community, Magus Wazir, the one who rings, who's very, very creative himself. But yeah, it means, it's obvious what it means. It's this project is about the lore, not the floor. So that sentiment just echoes throughout our community in so many ways. I mean, like I said, we do a weekly podcast called Wizard Wednesday, and so we put lore front and center there. We invite community members to read their book of lore entry, and we just talk about nerd stuff. We talk about lore. We talk about character. We talk about world building. And then our Discord is just like full of creative content. There's always just illustrations and stories and lore being posted in our Discord. Also, our Twitter obviously is just like an endless stream of cult content. We sometimes we have people sing on our Wizard Wednesday. We have a
Nice.
She Margaret. She writes songs. We call her our bard and spell singer.
Nice.
Yeah,
Love
and
it.
and then beyond that, one of the things that Magic Machine is very, one of the things that keeps us very, very busy is, while our cult is busy making content, some of the biggest things that we do is we are pursuing these larger media expressions. So we actually just finished a comic book that is actually being physically printed. It's on its way to the printer as we speak. We're going to print I think 200,000 copies, and we're going to give them all away for free.
Nice.
And the beauty of it is a lot of the stories in the comic are straight up from our book of lore. And so, it's amazing that, you can be in our cult, you can create a story about your wizard, and then it shows up in a physically printed comic book. This is the sort of the thing we want to keep doing. We also
your video game too.
Yeah. We have a video game in development. It's currently in production, and we've got, I think, 20 or 30 people working on it as we speak. And then one of the things I'm really excited about, because of my background in animation, is we've got a show being created. So currently, we just released a 1.5-minute fully animated trailer that was animated by Titmouse Studios in Los Angeles. It looks super professional. Everybody go watch it. It's on our Twitter. It's amazing.
I watched it again this morning. It's
awesome.
it reminds me of Saturday morning cartoons when I was a kid.
Yeah, perfect.
It's
great.
It's straight up 90s retro. It's outstanding.
Great. Yeah. Awesome. And then, but for the show, our partner Bear Snake, he brought in possibly the most perfect showrunner / writer to write the first episodes. It's this guy named Derek Kolstad, and he's freaking amazing. He's actually the creator of the John Wick franchise. He's worked on a few Marvel movies. He wrote the film Nobody with Bob Odenkirk. It's on Netflix right now.
That's good. I watched that.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. No, this guy is
it's a great movie.
You want to talk about a man who knows story. The guy is like a story genius. I've had a few meetings with him, just batting around some creative ideas, and it's just like talking story with that guy for me was just the most beautiful synergy. Like he gets it. He gets story. I mean, obviously he's a professional. And so, yeah, so he's just the perfect person to be creating the show version of the Runiverse for us. I'm so excited about working with him.
It'll be animated also. Is it also?
Yeah,
that's a question. And is it also going to be by Titmouse, like the same style?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the same style as the trailer. Yeah. So, yeah, and so yeah, so like and again, like a lot of the content that we want to put in the show is going to be content that we pull straight from the Book of Lore. I mean, that's what's fun to me about this project. It's truly a decentralized world building project. It's you're going to see characters. If you own a wizard, you're going to see wizards you own and that you wrote the lore for showing up on a professionally produced show. I mean, how cool is that?
I mean, that sounds like the dream.
Yeah.
That's the NFT dream right there.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's what this is all about. I just can't wait.
So, there's, as I mentioned earlier, the Forgotten Rune Wizards cult is a very successful project. It's got a floor price, not that matters because the lore is what matters. But it might be difficult for other community members who want to get involved and get excited about the Runiverse. But I do believe you have something minting very soon, if not imminently, that might allow others to gain access to the Runiverse.
Yeah. Tomorrow, actually, May 11th.
Right
yeah. So the Runiverse began with wizards, and tomorrow we're launching warriors. So when you've got wizards, you've got to have warriors. It's the
of course.
It's the sword and sorcery trope, the might and magic, brain and brawn. And so, yeah, the Warriors collection, Dota and I are putting the finishing touches on it today. It's looking amazing. And, but the most important thing about it is that it expands the world. It expands the community. It brings this whole new flavor of storytelling to the Runiverse. You think about the wizard and warrior trope all throughout history. That there's obvious ones like a Gandalf and Aragorn,
Merlin and Arthur.
Merlin and Arthur, perfect. Yep. But then there's even ones like Yoda and Luke Skywalker. You could even go so far as to say like Rocky Balboa and his trainer Mickey. That's a wizard.
Yeah, right. So yet another example of an archetype that is boundless and connecting all at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Amazing.
So yeah, we're very excited about it. If you want to join the cult, Warriors might be a great entry for you. But we at Magic Machine, we're always coming up with new tokenomics and new ways to expand the world. And we've also got a lot of collections. We've got a pony collection that your wizard can ride a pony. Hopefully the warriors will be able to ride them too. We've got a collection of souls where we, on Halloween, you could burn your wizard for a soul wizard in return. We did a beast auction where we auctioned 7 mythical legendary beasts. And even if you couldn't buy a beast, every beast released spawn for free to wizard holders. So, there's going to be all kinds of ways upcoming for people to join the community. So yeah, it's all about expanding the world.
Amazing. And you talked a lot about engagement and success there to building a truly decentralized community around your story. Maybe go back in time and tell us a little bit about how you drove awareness originally. Can you talk what it was like to, launch that amazing generator and what happened? How did you make people aware and get them excited initially to jump into the world?
Yeah. You mean like when we first launched Wizards?
When you first launched Wizards, yeah.
Yeah, that's always the hardest thing. It's like the art wasn't necessarily difficult for me. It just took a long time. The generator wasn't necessarily difficult for Dota, the smart contracts. These are all things that are within our wheelhouse. Promo and community management was something that was just totally new for both of us. So, we just sort of blindly stumbled our way through it. One of the techniques we used was just like, identifying, what you would call NFT influencers on Twitter and social media, and just sort of reaching out to them. And what we did in the beginning was we just like started making custom wizards for certain people, in hopes that they would just sort of tweet about us and talk about us. We actually never even demanded that they do so. We just, reached out and just said, hey, we'd like to make you a wizard. And, what was cool about that, besides just like some of the promo that we got from them, was it was sort of an extension of the whole decentralized world building process, because, they would describe like a character that they wanted. There were ideas that I never would have done or thought of myself. And we got some really cool characters out of that. Just, crowdsourcing ideas for characters in our world. And so that's one reason I loved doing that. But yeah, I mean, that's how we sort of grew. That's how we got our first leg up, I would say. Is
Right.
like a handful of those influencers started talking about us and bringing their audience in. So,
and it sounds like it's still at the root of the ethos of your project, which is decentralized, community-based storytelling. Just so you were doing the same thing, just in the earliest days. Yeah, we're finding that too. Most of the projects we speak to, and certainly as we're out there promoting and trying to gain interest for our Legends of Cypher project, it really is, you got to do the hard work. You got to build a fan base. You got to reach out. You got to have a passion and excitement for your story in order to get others passionate and excited about your story. And that's a common thread we find among all these projects.
It sounds obvious to say, but it's not, I think, to a lot of founders, which is, you can't just build a project like, here's the art and let's all pump the floor price. Like, that's not a mission. That's not a goal. That's not like something to galvanize a community around. That's pretty empty. You got to have like a purpose. You got to have
a story.
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta have like a mission, like something to rally around. And, for us, it was like lore and story and world building. Again, it sounds obvious, but I think a lot of projects might not really fully realize that.
Yeah,
we totally agree. We're 100% on that same page. So,
yep.
We're coming up on the hour, so I do want to get in a couple more questions. Can you tell us maybe one or two key lesson learned on your journey from getting started to where you are today? Any key lessons learned you could share for other burgeoning projects out there trying to make their way in stories?
Yeah. Oh man, so many. There's technical lessons. There's social lessons. There's art lessons.
How about story related or lore related?
Yeah. I mean, I guess like, okay, here's something that I like sort of, I guess, congealed in my mind while we were working on this Warriors collection, which is like, I've worked at studios in the past where there was not like a strong central leader. There wasn't a strong central vision. And the bosses just sort of relied on just throw money at it and hire a bunch of talent and we'll get something great. But there was no creative vision. You can't really buy creative vision. You've got to have it yourself, and you have to lead with that. And I've been lucky enough that my two partners like just fully trust me to just like sort of lead with like the meta lore of the Runeverse. And I guess what my advice is like, define your creative vision, and everything you make needs to follow that. I'm talking art, I'm talking the lore, I'm talking every single little feature of your collection. If you're naming your characters, the colors of your characters, like every element needs to follow that vision, and don't deviate from it in any way. Every single component, every single feature needs to follow that vision. And for me, it helps like having one person who knows what that vision is and just making everything follow that. But if your team is just like, number one, has no vision, or if the person does have that vision, if you're not listening to them, then you might get a little disharmony, a little chaos, and then it's going to ripple through the entire collection and just show that there's not really a central message.
Love it.
Yeah.
We can relate. Certainly in our project with Legends of Cypher, we rely heavily on Barry, our lead writer, to kind of keep the narrative flowing, keep the infrastructure intact. I mean, it's good that we'll share, we're all passionate about the story, and we all bring different capabilities to the telling of it. But I don't know, Barry, what do you think? You think we do a pretty good job of listening?
Yeah. No, totally. Totally. Like, so I've got a couple novels I've been working on for years, and that's one I have a process for that, right? Whatever it is, like sometimes it changes like day to day, but in building the Legends of Cypher, like, so I'm writing a graphic novel, and it's not me. I mean, it's me, but I have to get buy-in from Devin and Voice and James. It's not even buy-in. Like we spent like a year brainstorming, like, and world building. So I'm learning / creating a new process for me to write, but it is very much collaborative.
For sure.
But like I was saying earlier, or like you were saying, rather, like you got the lone genius, Tolkien or Martin or whoever, right? Creating their worlds. I think that speaks to what you're saying about creative vision. Like, I can't think of any books offhand that are considered great that were written by more than one person.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
I can't speak to other art forms though, but just in writing. So I hard agree with that.
And I just want to quickly say, I don't want to give the impression that I'm like the sole creative genius. I mean, my team, Dota, Bear, everybody else, they also throw in a lot of great ideas, and we incorporate those ideas, and our team is all very creative, and then of course the whole community, the whole idea of decentralized world building, like so many great things come out of the cult on a daily basis. But like, I guess totally. The point I was trying to make is like, there's still that core, and there's still that core vision that you need to maintain, and it'll carry the whole thing through.
I love the term.
Resonates with me.
Yeah, I love the term creative vision. I think that, that resonates. And I hope the audience gets a good perspective out of it. When we think about creative vision and, Barry's role, we always come back, if we're writing a piece that is kind of, like an anthology. We share writing these anthologies to help introduce the universe, but we all rely heavily on Barry, and it's a burden, right, to have that creative vision, and to really take accountability and ownership for making sure it comes to life in everything we do. So I've certainly gained a greater appreciation for what creative vision is, and it sounds like it's central to all great projects and storytelling. Last two questions for you. NFTs, Alf, do you think they're fads or enduring?
No, I think they're here to stay. I think, but how that said, I think we're going to see a similar pattern to, things like the .com boom of the late 90s, early 2000, or even like the ICO boom of 2017. You're going to see a lot of projects drop off, projects that were in it for the wrong reasons. Let's call it a crash. I'm sure there's going to be a crash of some shape or form sooner or later. But I also think there's a long tail. I think the quality projects will rise to the top. And I think they're here to stay because it's such a powerful technology capable of so much. Again, when I was in CalArts, when I realized that animation and then video games were such an unexplored medium, I think, obviously NFTs are like such a brand new frontier. There's so many new ways to do tokenomics, to structure your generator, to tell a story through a community. I mean, this is just a brand new arena, and there's no way that it's going away.
It's a new medium that I think it allows, or at least it will allow, for more immersion in the storytelling, whether it's the gamification of written word or it's literal games or it's whatever. But more immersion creates more emotional attachment, creates longer, more devoted community and fans.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Last question for you, Alf. You spoke about there'll be a long tail. So we safe to assume that the best projects and the best stories will emerge. So how long do you think until a decentralized autonomous organization or decentralized storytelling community will be up on the stage of a mainstream award, like an Academy Award or an Emmy accepting on behalf of a community? How many months, years?
Yeah, if there's one thing that the crypto scene is notorious for, it's predictions. So,
What?
It's I'm not sure if I can give a prediction. Hell, I don't know, 3 years. Let's put it that way.
Perfect.
I'll say this, and of course I would say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think Forgotten Runes has got a hell of a chance at being one of those projects, and I'm not just saying it blindly. Like I said, we've got Derek Kolstad writing our show. We've got a full-on Runeverse game being built. We've got comics in production. We've got a ton of other things in our back pocket that we haven't even revealed yet. And the reason these things are happening is number one, I think our core project is great, but number two, our team is phenomenal. We are veterans in this thing. We've been working in the entertainment industry for over a decade. We're well connected.
Oh, nice.
Dota is an incredible Solidity programmer. He's a brilliant tokenomics innovator. Our core team has just got so much experience and talent at doing this sort of thing. And, I think that's what's really going to carry us across the finish line.
Well, we appreciate immensely the fact that you brought in a ton of that experience to our podcast today on #StoryFirst.
Yes, thank you.
I know we've benefited from the time today. I know our audience will benefit from the time today. And I really do hope we can stay connected as community thought leaders and collaborators in the space and help each other along. And, we're big fans, and I want to thank you again, Al, for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge and experience.
I enjoyed it very much. I really appreciate the invite. It's always fun to talk about story and projects and crypto. So thank you so much.
Amazing.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And so for the audience, we'll have all the links and everything available with our podcast descriptions, but head out to forgottenruins.com. And you can check out all the details and, keep an eye out for the Warriors minting soon.
Watch that trailer.
Blockchain near you. Yeah, check out the trailer. We're big fans. Really enjoyed it. And thank you, Alf, and all the best of luck to you and that amazing team.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Talk to you later.
Cheers.
Thanks, Alf.
Bye.